Welcome back to the third unit of our class. After introducing the theme, now we are going deeper into the subject itself. As we said in our introduction, what's the definition of ethics? Remember? Ethics is a normative philosophical science which deals with human action or human behavior or human conduct insofar as the human conduct is considered as good or bad, right or wrong. And we also said the material object is the human behavior or human conduct, and the formal object is the goodness or evilness or the rightness or wrongness of human act. Now, to understand then what is ethics, we should know what we mean by human act. What is called human act? That's a basic concept in ethics. So this session is an evaluation and an analytical study of human act. When I say human act, there is always a difference between human act and act of a human being. Listen carefully. A human act and act of a human being. These two expressions are not the same. There are some differences. A human act means an act which is done with full knowledge and full freedom, or an act that proceeds from the free will of a human person, that is called a human act. Then what is the second one? Act of a human being. It is something different. For example, now you are listening to the class, isn't it? Just be still now. And just remember how many times you may be just touched with your hand on your face or your nostrils or your head, or how many times you have shaking your leg or maybe biting your finger. So many things are there. And if I ask why? No answer. And some of us are not at all remembering it or not at all thinking that it is already happened. But when we observe our companions, we can often see that people are doing all such mannerisms in their life. And when we ask them why? No answer. Because they are not at all aware. Such things are called an act of a human being, but when an act is being proceeded from the free will of a human person, that is called a human act. So how to distinguish between a human act and act of a human being? We can have the following things or traits that will help us to differentiate between an act of a human being and a human act. Such as, in a human act, if we examine, we can find out at least five traits in a human act which we cannot find in an act of a human being. The first thing, reflection. Reflection, the first one. Before acting, we may reflect about what we are going to do. Remember, this may not happen in a habitual thing. By routine, we may be doing so many things without even reflecting and without even knowing. For example, climbing steps. If somebody is asking you, how many steps are there? We don't know. We never counted it because automatically we will be walking. So it is not something as a reflective act, but it is an automatic act. Therefore, we cannot say that any morality in climbing or walking on the steps. No. Because it is not a reflective act. But for a human act, the first thing before acting, we may reflect upon it that what we are going to do. The second thing, an aim. A person not only reflects but also in virtue of voluntary decision aims at and intends the effect of question and the activity which will be produced, what it will produce. That means we are aiming at something, then we are moving. In an act of a human being, we cannot find this aspect there. Then the third, end or a purpose or a motivation. So we want to achieve something. So we reflect on something, we aim at that, and we have a final destination or an end, and we have that force. It is this end that is making us to do such activities. Then the fourth one, most important, freedom. When I do something, I should know that I have the freedom either to do it or not to do it. I am not under any compulsion. So, for a human action, there will be freedom and it is a necessary requirement. And finally, if there is freedom, there is responsibility. So, if somebody is asking, why you are doing that? I have to tell, it is my act and I am responsible for it. I know what I have done. I know what I have done. That's the secret of a human act. But in an act of a human being, I don't know why I did that and I am not responsible. It's just happened. So, ethics is concerned only with the human act and not the act of a human being. The mannerisms, the habitual things, nothing of that sort is in the field of ethics, but the ethics mainly speaking about the human acts. That may be the subject of psychology. The psychologist will observe a person doing all kinds of these things, mannerisms, and he may have his own conclusion why that is happening and what is the meaning behind it, everything. It is a part of psychology, but for ethics, no. Ethics is dealing only with human act. That means an act proceeds from the free will of a human person. Once again, recall that sentence. An act proceeds from the free will of a human person. The most important word there is the will, free will. What do you mean by will? What is that? Will. The will to act. If there is a will, there is a way. We always speak about the will. So what is it actually? The will is one of the faculties in a human person. One of the faculties in a human person help us to do our human acts or activities. One of the faculties. Okay. There are two faculties in ethics. One is the will and the other one is the intellect. These are the two guidelines or principles working behind all our ethical judgments. Intellect and the will. So now let us go to the will. What is the nature of will and what do you mean by will? According to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, they define will as a kind of appetite in a human person. Will is a kind of appetite in a human person. What do you mean by an appetite? Appetite means the urge to achieve something. That is called an appetite. When there is something praiseworthy, when there is something worthy enough, then I have an urge within my heart to have it. So we have the physical appetites like I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. That's a kind of appetite. But these kind of appetites we are sharing with other animals and other beings. So according to Aristotle and according to St. Thomas Aquinas, at least there are 3 levels of appetite in a human person. 3 levels of appetite in a human person. The basic level, the vegetative level of appetites. The second one, the sensus level of appetite. And the third one, the rational level of appetite. The vegetative level of appetite means what we share with the vegetative world, where the need for light, the need for nourishment, such things are there, and we have that urge. If there is no light, if there is no nourishment, we cannot survive. So it's a physical need, or it's a need in the vegetative level. Such things are called the vegetative levels of appetite, upon which we have no control at all. We cannot decide that hereafter I never use oxygen in my life. No, impossible. Because it's a natural need. Such appetites are called vegetative levels of appetite we share with other living beings. Higher than that, another appetite called sensus level appetite, that we share with the animal world. For example, an animal having certain kinds of appetites which is higher than the vegetative level. So a dog can smell the smell of the food, and it can go and search for it, and finally it can attain it and enjoy it or satisfied with the food. They are the sensus levels. And in human persons also, there are sensus levels of appetites, and there also we may have certain control, but we don't have full control upon that. But what makes a man, a human person, above the animals? Aristotle defined man as the rational animal. Remember, man is the rational animal. That means man also belonging to the animal kingdom, but his rationality distinguishes himself above the animal world, and that will make him as a human person. So what is the trait of human person is his capacity of rationality. And when we have the capacity of rationality, as we are rational being, we have certain appetites, certain desires, certain yearnings in the level of that rational level. And Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas calls it the will. The will. So we know then what is the will. The definition is, it is the rational appetency in a human person, or the rational appetite in a human person to acquire what is good and to avoid what is evil. What is the nature of this will? St. Thomas Aquinas again clarifies. The will is having its nature as it is something very, very, very passive. The will is something very, very passive. It cannot take its own decision. And it can take decision only according to the data given by the intellect. Remember I said 2 faculties, the intellect and the will. So the role of the intellect is to secure knowledge, gather knowledge, and to make it understandable. So through the sense organs and through the experiences, the intellect will gather all the data of the knowledge and make it something intelligible or make it something comprehensible, and it is the intellect that decides whether it is good or whether it is evil. And when this knowledge is being communicated to the will act accordingly. And the will is having the nature is that the will always do only what is good. Only what is good. It is impossible for the will to do something evil, knowing that it is something evil. Then why people commit sin? Why people go astray, morally speaking? it is not the problem with the will, but it's the problem with the intellect. When the intellect misunderstands the data which is being given, and miscalculations and misjudgment, and as if that is something good, the intellect may communicate something evil to the will, and automatically the will think that it is something good and act accordingly. That is why the famous dictum of Socrates, no man errs willingly. You remember this? No man errs willingly. Knowing that it is something evil to myself, my will not allow that. Then some may question, then what about suicide? Knowing that it is something evil, a person is going for suicide. Socrates will answer like this. No, even in suicide, at that moment, the intellect will communicate to the will that this is the only way, the best way and the good way to come out of this problem, and it is given to the will in such a distorted knowledge, therefore the will go for it. That is why a person do something objectively evil, but subjectively it is something good, that the will believes. So that's the nature of the will. And so therefore, the will by its very nature will always do what is good. But under two conditions, the will may go for evil. The first thing, when it is misunderstood by intellect. And the second, in order to avoid a greater evil, the will may go for the lesser evil. For example, not everybody like injections or operations. But when the doctors are communicating us that it is better go for an operation rather than suffer so long, or that may fatal in your life, not willingly but reluctantly we admit that, okay, I am going for it. So in order to avoid a greater evil, the will may choose something lesser evil. Otherwise, it is the nature of the will, it will go always what is good in itself. So that is the will, and we know what is an intellect. Intellect we have studied already in our epistemology, the capacity of the intellect to gather the data of knowledge and make it understandable and communicatable. So that is the duty of the intellect. So these are the two faculties that may help us to go with our moral activity. So any act that proceeds from the free will of a human person is called a human act. Now, let us go for the classification of human act. So actually then, what is a human act? What is a human act? Many times we believe that when we do something objectively, only that will become a human act. If you are not doing something physically, then it is not an act at all. But remember what Jesus said, when you look at a woman lustfully, you have committed adultery in your heart. But I never touched her. I never did anything against her. No physical contact, nothing. But when I think about that, there is already that action is happened. That means no need of a physical and visible activity to be called a human act. Even something within our heart, something invisible, that also can be a human act. So the human act can be classified into two categories, and the first one is called elicited act, and the second one is called commanded act. Elicited act and commanded act. What do you mean by an elicited act? When an activity begins from the will and ends in the will, not even being communicated to our external organs. That means any activity in the thinking level or reflection level, such activities are called elicited act. Then the second category called commanded act. What do you mean by a commanded act? normally the actions begins here from the will, then from the will it is being communicated to our external organs. And when it is being communicated to our external organs, then we visibly do that particular act. Such things are called commanded act. Any visible action, that is called a commanded act. Any invisible action, that are called elicited act. So, and in every series of action, we can have elicited part and a commanded part. So, a human act is a combination of elicited acts and the commanded acts. So, we have, I think, now the necessary requirement to understand what is a human act. Just to explain further, let us see what is the psychological structure of a human act. The psychological structure of a human act. With an example, we can go with like this. I just explain. Or first I will tell you, in the structure there are 6 points. First, wish or liking. Second, intention. Third, consent. Fourth, choice. Fifth, use. And sixth, delight or enjoyment. These are the 6 psychological structure of the human act. Wish or liking. For example, one of you or all of you or anybody wants to go for a shopping or something, or maybe for an outing. Okay? So first of all, in front of us, a big world of wishes and liking are open. So shopping means, in my mind, I wish to have so many things, because the world is so wide and open. So many things are there. So I am going for that. But, so there is a wish in my heart for all these things. But unfortunately, not all my wishes can be satisfied because of the lack of time and the lack of finance and the lack of capacity. So, innumerable number of wishes and liking in a human person. And among these wishes and liking, we restrict ourselves to the second level, intention. So, I need so many things for shopping, but finally I decide, according to my money situation and my time and my capacity, I just select maybe a pair of shirts or pants or clothing or maybe shoe or something like that, or a mobile phone or a computer. So, my intention is restricted there. That means from the multitude of likings and wishes, I come closer to what I actually want. That is my intention. Here, the wish becomes an active striving of the will for the attainment of a particular object or a particular aim, a particular thing. That is called intention. That means I want to buy that, or I want to go to that particular place, or I want to eat that particular food. So it is called intention. So when there is intention, we move to the third level, that is consent. It is a part of the will. The will examine according to the knowledge communicated from the intellect and whether it is suitable for my life situation. So everything of my intention need not be suitable for my life situation. So I have to then give consent. Okay, it is good. You proceed, man. So I have to give, my will have to give the consent to do for that, for its execution. When the consent is being given, then the problem of choice, the fourth thing, the choice. That means I have to find out the best way to acquire it. Because so many ways I can go for that. So many ways are open in front of me and so many varieties are open in front of me. But I have to select the best thing. That is the choice I have to make, and always the problem will come under this intention, consent and choice. Once the choice is made, then the consent is given, I proceed to the fifth the use. That means I go for it. I go for it. And when I have it, the sixth, delight or enjoyment. Delight or enjoyment. I'm happy that I have that thing. I have performed that. So these are the six traits as the part of psychological structure of a human act. Anything in our life, whatever we do, we may not be doing all these steps: wish and liking, intention, consent, choice, use, and delight and enjoyment, but it is there. Only when we are able to examine or look through a microscopic like, then we will be understanding, yes, indeed, all these things are there. That is why it is called the psychological structure of a human act. So now we are ready. We know what is a human act. And when we take this human act into our moral classes, now the problem of voluntariness. Voluntariness. What's the meaning of voluntariness? We know we are volunteers for so many things. But what is it? At least two things are a must for a volunteer. First of all, knowledge. Second, freedom. Knowledge and freedom. And we can add one more thing, the voluntariness or the willingness to go for it. So these are the main things in a voluntariness. And it is said a human act must be voluntary in itself. That means there must be knowledge and there must be freedom and there must be the willingness for that. So then only it will become a human act.